Thank you, Elyn, for joining this interview. You were the former DRR and Climate National Program Coordinator for Netherlands Red Cross in the Philippines. What are the main disasters the Philippines is currently experiencing?
Thank you for having me. The main disasters that the Philippines is facing is really typhoon. Every year, the Philippines is visited with 22 or more typhoons, and five of that is can be disastrous. So that's the main disaster, and also because of that, it affects flooding, landslide. And the Philippines also experience volcanic eruption, earthquake also. So yeah.
Okay, and have some of these risks increased over time?
Yeah, it increased over time because before, especially those communities in the coastal area, they're very used to typhoons because, as I've said, we are visited by 22 at the most, 22 typhoons a year. So they are used to that. But then during the 2013 Typhoon Haiyan, everybody was caught unaware that it can be that disastrous because we never experienced category 5 typhoon. That was the first time that the typhoon was category 5. So everybody was caught unaware. That's why there was a lot of death because they don't know what is category 5, how it can impact them. So they just treated it as the usual typhoon experience that they are used to. But then, because of the climatic stimuli, I think climate change, then it became worse and worse now. Like even now, recently, they can compare the typhoons from the previous years. It's getting stronger and stronger. Yeah.
When you say category 5, what wind speeds does this have? And how many people were killed?
Yeah, I guess I remember that time it was like 300 something, 300 plus something speed of the wind, and when I was there, I was the first, of the responding team on the ground, and then we we continue to monitor the number of deaths, and I think they stopped counting when they reached 7,000 something, because you cannot anymore locate some deaths, like they were already buried from, because there were also landslide, there were also a lot a lot happened at the same time during the Typhoon Haiyan. So there were some people who were tossed in the sea, and yeah, they were not found, and people were missing. So after I think a year or two, they stopped counting. Yeah, but that was very disastrous.
Okay. And how do organizations such as the Philippine Red Cross prepare for these disasters?
And yeah, and because of that, and because of that, um disaster. But before Haiyan, there were a lot of disasters, and in the 70s, it was just purely response. But because of that, because they realized that it's more expensive to respond, so why don't we do preparedness and readiness and all this stuff, investing on that. So then from the national disaster management, the law were enacted in 2010, which was called Republic Act 10121. This is a Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of 2010, and this is the mandate of the government to strengthen the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management System. So then, and then the Red Cross came. Since the Red Cross is an auxiliary to the government, they took the responsibility to train the community, because Red Cross is also the one of the first few organizations to respond to disasters and calamities like this. So, and they also partnered with other national societies like Netherlands, Germany, um, Norwegian Red Cross, all these national societies. So they make a program on disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation to equip the community people in times of disaster. So the Red Cross always has this what we call 143 volunteers. So this is 143 volunteers are composed of 44 people, one leader and 43 members. So these volunteers are equipped, trained, and tasked to do their roles during the disaster. Like for example, there are team who will address the rescue, search and rescue group. There is a team addressing the health, the health. So the first aider, or the in times of like normalcy, non-disaster events, they can also do health teaching. So these are also the people, and there are also group of people out of that volunteers who will do who will have their own responsibilities in times of evacuation. So they have a role, the role and the responsibility during the disasters and non-disaster events in the community. So that's what the Red Cross did, because it's really very important to equip the community, because they are at the forefront of disasters before the international organizations or before the aid could come in. They are the first to be affected, and they're the ones confronted by these calamities and disasters. So they have to they have to be equipped. So that's the role of the Red Cross. Plus also there is a law. There is a law that should be that mandates the local government units for the preparation and readiness during the disaster, as well as the climate change adaptation. Like for example, programs that can mitigate the effects of climate change. So this can be seen in their plans, like housing, in their infrastructures, in the education, like that, in the health. So these are all integrated. The law is all integrated. So there are the act, the act, the Republic Act 10121 is also to strengthen the risk reduction and management system of the Philippines, and at the same time to institutionalize the disaster risk reduction and management plan. And then funds. There should be funds allocated for that, for other purposes also. So that's the that's the collaboration of Red Cross and the government in strengthening the readiness and preparedness of community.
So the Red Cross is actually training communities to be able to respond to disasters themselves without external support at the beginning.
Yeah. Like for example, there is a law. There is a law, and there is even an allocation that we call internal revenue allotment for every community, and these funds should be allocated like 70% for preparedness and 30% for response. But then the local government units themselves doesn't know how to utilize this, or doesn't know what to do with these funds. So one of the roles of Red Cross is to educate them and inform them that this is how it is being allocated. But this is not what the Red Cross imposed. That's why we have a process. We have a community process. We go to them, we go to the area, we go to the community, and we talk about what are the disasters that they always experience. So we do all the assessment. It's like strengthening science-based and evidence-based planning. It's like that. We do the assessment and everybody is involved, so then they know what to do with their, like for example, we have 70% preparedness and readiness. What are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with this money? So then they plan. But of course, because you inform them, you educate them, including the local government units from the municipal up to the barangay level, so they now know how to utilize their funds.
And barangay is neighborhood, no? Or the...
Barangay is like a small unit of society. It's like a community, like a small part of the community. And sometimes these are really the community that's being affected. Municipal level, it can be very, very broad. Like it can be in the city, and it can be in, yeah. So barangay is a small like community.
Okay, and you mentioned evacuation. Can you explain a little bit how an evacuation drill and simulation works in practice?
Yeah. So during the process with them, during the process with the community assessment and then planning, part of their disaster risk reduction management plan is evacuation plan. It should be integrated like contingency plan, evacuation plan. Contingency plan, they have to do the worst case scenario because of the climate change. So we tell them like, if before you just experienced 4 feet flooding, now because of climate change it could be more. So you have to do a worst case scenario contingency planning. So therefore it should also be connected with your evacuation plan, right? You cannot just put your evacuation plan on the lower ground because of the flooding. You have to put it up, but make sure this ground is not also affected by landslide. So because we also have this do no harm intervention. So we really have to guide them. And so people, and together with their local government units, they plan together. So in the evacuation plan, we also assign volunteers, like for example, who will go after those who are the person with special needs, for example, deaf or blind or who cannot walk, and then also for the pregnant women who will take care of them. But the important thing is there should be in the evacuation plan a early warning device, like early warning device that is being communicated and understood by the community people. Like for example, some communities, they decide that the church bell will be there, what is this, to warn them that it's time to evacuate, to go out of your house and evacuate. Some of the communities are doing whistle, like for example, they do whistle and they go around the community. And some who are using indigenous materials, they do a bamboo flap. Like for example, there's a bamboo tree, and then they make out of it where it creates sound. So that's the thing. So but for those who cannot hear, who cannot see, there are volunteers who have to round them up in the community and make sure that everybody evacuated. So that's part of the plan. So they won't create like panic because they know what to do. And this evacuation plan doesn't only sit there in the office of the local government units, nor it's just a document. They have to do drill and simulation. So sometimes they have to do it 3 times a year, 2 times a year. And as a Red Cross, we encourage them to do drill and simulation, and then we are there to observe and evaluate what they're doing. But they're doing it really effectively because they coordinate. Everybody coordinates in the community. Like the police will do the security, and the social services will do the local will do the listing of the evacuees, and the local government has to do prepositioning of goods also. It's important in the evacuation plan to have a goods preposition before the disaster, because as I've mentioned a while ago, they are the first one who will burn the brunt during the disaster. Nobody, like sometimes organizations cannot go through because of the impassable roads and all these factors. So they have to have their own goods. So everybody should coordinate and do their roles and tasks. So then at the evacuation center, there's also people who will do the listing and who will put them in their assigned room. Like for example, if your families and all this, so you have to do that listing and guide them. So there will be no instances like panic or stampede or things like that.
And
So that's
what
also
buildings are used as evacuation centers? Is it schools or other buildings?
before schools were used as evacuation centers before, but then the Department of Education like made an appeal, like you cannot use the classrooms of the student children because they will come back to school after a week, and if things are calmer they will come back to continue school. But because there are a lot of evacuees, they cannot anymore use their classroom. So then it was like we really encourage the local government units to allot a budget for evacuation centers. So, and because not all the communities have a lot of internal revenue allotment, because it depends on the income of your community. So those who are poor, they just contend with tents, like they just go and put up temporary shelters like tarpaulins, so tents, and some would go to like a arena or a gymnasium that is not built robust, that's not robust, so they collapse in times of disaster. So it's more like more exposing them to the dangers. So there are still a lot to learn from the ground, but because finance is also an issue, so then it's really important that the local government would really allot funds for evacuation centers, and they should build like really an evacuation center on the if they are suffering from flooding, if it's always flooding or landslide, they have to build it in a place where it's safe, and at the same time it should be like with people with special need could access that, something like that, and it should be safe for children, for women. So yeah, but during their simulation and drill, we do recommendations, like for example, you don't have lights, you don't have, so it's dangerous for the children to go to the comfort room or bathroom or something like that. So there if you oftenly practice your evacuation plan, if you always do drill and simulation, there are always areas of improvement. So you know what are those to be filled in, like there's still a lot of gaps to fill in, so you know. So it's important, so that's why we encourage them as Red Cross, we encourage them to practice their evacuation center.
Do you
uh,
think this has saved a lot of lives? Uh,
evacuation.
do you think because of the good evacuation drills and so on, this has already saved a lot of lives and people are now less victim of these typhoons than before?
Yeah, somehow, because they were involved in the process, they now understand the hazards, they understand the hazards and the effects and the disastrous effects if this will happen. So they're more informed, especially even climate change, about climate change. They are now aware, they're informed. Before, they don't know what is this, what is climate change, they don't know about it. And before Red Cross came in, they just take it as part of their life. Yeah, there will be a typhoon, then we have to just live with it. But now they know how to. Before, you cannot make them leave their houses, but because of a lot of information, education, and awareness, they just leave their house and go to the evacuation center that is assigned for them. So I think somehow it lessens the casualties, and the involvement is very important. The involvement of people is very important, because that's how you get the cooperation. So they should involve, they should be involved in the process and make them own the process, so that they can do it by themselves. Also, you're just there to guide, we're just there to facilitate, but they own the process. So we're just empowering them to okay, you have to save yourself, you have to save your neighbors, you have to do this to lessen the impact of the casualties. That's why during that Typhoon Haiyan, there's also additional lesson learned, because we don't know that that strong typhoon. It was the first time. Yeah, it was the first time. So there was
Okay.
also lessons learned that time.
Very, very interesting. Maybe to conclude, what can we as Red Cross Flanders learn from the experience of the Philippines in terms of dealing with a changing climate?
Yeah, I think with the event of the climate change, Red Cross Flanders might want to scale up in terms of their interventions with people, not just limited to, like, for example, blood bank or something, or social services. But I think it's high time also, because of what happened in other cities in Belgium, like Dinant, Namur, that they were like, they're already experiencing flood and this kind of disaster. So I think it's high time for Red Cross Flanders to also go go to the community, to the people, and involve them and in their process, and at the same time organize volunteers. Although there are volunteers, I'm sure, but it's really good if you have an organized volunteers that would really commit when things happen, that they're committed, they are trained, they are equipped. Because with us, with Red Cross, we also provide them with basic rescue equipments. Aside from the knowledge, we train them how to swim, to do rescue and search operations. So there are volunteers that Red Cross Flanders can tap in the areas where it's now frequented by flooding. Because I've never seen, like, I couldn't believe that now some of the places in Belgium are underwater. So I think it's high time to it's a paradigm shift for, I mean, to not just respond also, because you have all the capacity to respond. Like, the government can provide housing, can even immediately house the people and all. But what about those who are directly affected? For example, their psychological needs, their things like that. Whereas if the Red Cross Flanders would be uh, empowering these people to understand really what's happening, and then encouraging volunteers, and then together plan what to do, then I think it would be like, it won't be a shock really. It's not like a shock for the Belgians to experience this kind of thing, because I'm sure they did not experience this. It's just experienced by the third world. So now it's happening even in the developed countries because of the climate change. So yeah, I think it's high time for Red Cross Flanders to scale up their interventions.
Okay, and maybe last question about what can we do to address the needs of the vulnerable groups in Belgium?
Yeah, like, it's not just about flooding, because it's also about like heat wave. So it's good that you have these volunteers who would really take care of the needs of the vulnerable people, like, for example, the old folks in the community, those who cannot walk, those who are those people with special needs, the children, the pregnant women. Like, yeah, it's not about like, it doesn't mean that they're helpless or what, but it's also very good if there are people who are committed and tasked to help them when disaster strikes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. It's been very, very interesting and very informative. And I'm sure Red Cross Flanders will learn from your experience in the Philippines. And we will soon be able to be better equipped to deal with the changing climate also in our
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Elyn.
You're welcome.